Hello, welcome back to the Edge of the Box podcast, a podcast by WhoScored.com. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by Ben from WhoScored, and legendary journalist Jonathan Wilson is with us as ever as well. Now, usually we'd preview the Premier League weekend, but because there's been a huge midweek fixture list, and in particular one game, we thought we'd do a review straight after Manchester City 4, Arsenal 1. Jonathan, I'll come to you first. I'm a little bit underwhelmed by this game. I feel like it's been built up for months and months and months, and then by the time it's rolled round, Arsenal have been a little bit in pieces, and it's been a little bit of an anticlimax. Am I right in feeling that way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the last three games meant that it didn't have the heat it might have had. The fact that Arsenal had dropped the 6 points in the three games, they could have been 11 points clear going into this game. If it held the lead against Liverpool, against West Ham, if they hadn't conceded 3 goals against Southampton, and if they'd been 11 points clear albeit having played 2 games more than City, then suddenly there's real pressure on City. But as it was, that pressure wasn't really there. City were exceptionally good, I thought, tonight, as poor as Arsenal were. I mean, maybe Arsenal weren't even that poor. They were just ordinary. They were okay. And City just were better than them from the first seconds. Got the early goal. And it was just a very, very emphatic win. And they're still not top. They're still 2 points behind. But, I think this will be wrapped up sooner rather than later.
You did call it a few weeks ago. You said it was over when Arsenal first drew a game, didn't you? After the Liverpool game, I think it was.
I just felt that people were getting a little bit carried away with that 8-point lead. That it was an 8-point lead, having played a game more. So that reduces it to 5, and then they've got to play. Having played 2 games more, so that reduces it to. Reduces it to 5, and then they had to play City, which reduces it to 2. So as soon as they dropped a point, given City's goal difference was better, City were in control. So especially the way that they dropped the points at Liverpool. I know people tried to sort of, pretend there was still, pretend's the wrong word. People were keen to see that there was still drama in the title race. And sort of, at least they held on. And, at least Ramsdale made those saves later on in that game. But you just can't be going around chucking away 2-goal leads when you're so obviously the underdog as Arsenal were.
Yeah, and especially when it becomes a pattern as well, and it ended up happening the 2 games after as well, dropping points. It feels like the jeopardy from this tie was removed a little bit before it came round. Now, Ben, as a Spurs fan, I imagine tonight's probably the best night of the season for you.
Well, yeah, especially after Sunday's debacle at Newcastle. Obviously, Spurs fans donned their City shirts and were thrilled, overall thrilled when De Bruyne put them ahead after 6 minutes, and then from there it was basically cruise control until obviously potential nervy setup, and Rob Holding decided to turn into prime De Bruyne late on. But yeah, City held on. Tottenham fans happy. Arsenal fans obviously disappointed with the result, but it was probably one that they would have expected given the run of form and their recent performances at City. So
yeah. I mean, if Holding could defend like he finished, Jonathan, it may have been a different game. I thought after 6 minutes, I was like, Arsenal are in trouble here. And Rob Holding in particular is in trouble here, because after 6 minutes, I was watching him and thinking, he hasn't done a single thing yet that you want your centre-back do to alleviate any nerves. He did not exude calm at all in that first 6 minutes. And trying to get into a wrestling match with Haaland that early in the game, a touch of naivety, and it was kind of a little bit of a throwback to last season when he was forced to play against Tottenham, and that kind of blew their top 4 chances. He always seems to be in and around the scene when things start to go wrong for Arsenal at the climatic point of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's just symptomatic of the fact that Arsenal's squad isn't deep enough to sustain a title challenge. And this isn't a surprise to us. This is why nobody backed Arsenal to win the title at the start of the season, because we could look at that squad and you could say, yeah, the first 11's really good. They've got 2 or 3 decent reserves, but you don't have to go down very far to start getting through the elite level of that squad. So I really hope Holding isn't scapegoated. But the fact is that if Saliba had been there, and they haven't kept a clean sheet in the last 7 games now, they let in 11 goals in the last 4. And Saliba got bullied by Ivan Toney, so I'm not sure this wouldn't have happened necessarily, particularly tonight with Haaland, had Saliba been there. But they'd have had a better chance. And also, it's not even just about personnel, about individuals. Gabriel's a better player when Saliba's there directing him.
Yeah.
But his positioning on the against Southampton on the second goal and the Walcott goal, I thought that was really, really odd positioning. And I think had Saliba been there, maybe his position would have been different. And then you think, well, actually, Arsenal have been a little bit unlucky as well that to lose Tomiyasu at the same time as Saliba. I'm not sure Tomiyasu would have played in the middle tonight. I think.
Do you think Ben White would have shifted across?
Ben White moved across and Tomiyasu played it right back. I think would have been more likely, particularly given that Arteta would play Tomiyasu against Grealish at the game at the Emirates. That he was clearly sort of uneasy about Grealish's dribbling ability against Ben White, his capacity to come inside. So I wondered whether there was even a shout for moving Ben White into the middle and playing Kieran Tierney at right back, which he has. I know he's a left back, but he has done that for Scotland. And I think against Grealish, being stronger on the inside foot might not be the worst thing in the world. But these are they're ad hoc patchwork solutions. If you have a squad that's a title-winning squad, you have the depth. Means you really don't have to do that, or you certainly hope you wouldn't have to do it in the biggest game of the season.
I mean, I think you raise a valid concern. I don't think it's that Holding is a bad player. I think it's just that you take one person out of that back line, and let's say, I don't know, Gabriel comes out and someone else comes in at left centre back. You're disrupting a unit that's been together for the entirety of the season, really. And just by pulling one person out of that, it probably naturally makes everyone drop a yard or 5 yards deeper. It adds an air of uncertainty that wouldn't be there if you're playing in the unit that's played in week after week. Yeah,
I mean, that's true. I don't want to be too sympathetic to Holding because I just don't think he's at the level of the other players. So it does make a difference that it is Rob Holding. But you're right. Any disruption when you've had that solid back four is going to make a difference. And maybe that's where, we've been saying all season, one of the great advantages Arsenal had was that they weren't in the Champions League, that they could rest players, play a weaker team in the Europa League. They clearly weren't too bothered by that. Well, maybe if they'd had Champions League football, they could have mixed and matched that back four a bit more. They could have got more players, more experience, playing in more different permutations of that against high level of opposition. So I think it probably has helped them not playing in the Champions League. But this is where you see the downside of that the once that unit is broken up, there are players who aren't familiar with each other having to play in a big game against high level opponents.
Yeah, and Ben Moss, we can question the Arsenal backline. Manchester City sprung a little bit of a surprise in that the kind of box formation that they've made with John Stones pushing forward into midfield didn't really happen from what I could see anyway in the game tonight. It was more a flat back four. But Man City are just so adaptable and they can come up with these different plans and play in different ways. So Arsenal may have planned all week that Man City would have played that box formation that they've been doing for the last 3-4 games. And then, Kyle Walker comes in and plays. Maybe if Ake had been fit, that wouldn't have happened, but Ake wasn't fit. And maybe Arsenal have planned for something that wasn't there. I don't know, because they did look uneasy from minute one, Arsenal.
Yeah, and I think that really... Sorry, Ben. I think that really... It played to City's advantage because they had your Walker's pace against Martinelli, and Akanji did a very good job on Saka as well. I mean, they weren't getting huge amounts of service, but I'd sort of thought before the game, if Laporte comes in at left back, for instance, then maybe Saka can get a run at him. Or if it was Gomez, I thought Gomez was unlikely given he hasn't started the Premier League game yet. But you look at Saka in that matchup and you think he can get joy there. Akanji played very, very well against him, as we've seen him play very well on the other side against Bayern Munich against pace. Walker's pace against Martinelli, I think, was a really useful thing. So the area where Arsenal might have hurt City was wide. And so I guess City, by not playing Stones and that sort of wing half role, maybe they risk surrendering a bit of control in midfield. But the positive was they neutralised Arsenal's biggest threat, which was out wide.
Yeah, Jonathan's right, isn't he, Ben? Because Saka and Martinelli weren't really in the game. And then if Jesus tries to drop deep like he has done all season, there's a small matter of Rodri being in the way. Manchester City one, they're a fascinating side. Two, they're just an amazing side because on the face of it, they don't really have a left back in their squad. They've been playing Cancelo left back for the last few years, and he's done an excellent job there. He goes, and they still Pep just finds ways around these things all the time and just manages to make them more complete and make them better.
Yeah, I think the fact that Ake has that versatility and he can play left back and is able to play centre back meant that the Cancelo exit kind of forced Pep into do that 3-man back line. But I mean, obviously, without him tonight, Akanji did do a really good job at left back. And City, when they did have the ball, kind of pushed Walker a bit further up into that central midfield role to join Rodri and Gundogan in the midfield. You saw Akanji, Diaz, and Stones move across slightly when they did have the ball. That was when they weren't going direct and essentially playing 4-2-4, getting the ball long to Haaland, and then he just knocked on to De Bruyne. So, I mean, it's just, this is what Pep Guardiola is paid to do, and this is why he's revered as one of the best in the job, best in the game. Sorry, and credit to him. And as Jonathan heaped praise on Akanji, it's hard not to tonight because he did a superb job at left back.
I mean, collectively from Arsenal, Jonathan, it wasn't brilliant. I don't know if you're going to agree with me here, but a few months ago, I was watching Thomas Partey and thinking he was the complete midfielder in there for Arsenal, but he just seems to have slowed down over the last few games. Not really been that destroyer. He's not been picking up the loose balls, winning the battles in the middle of the park, and he just looks a couple of yards slower, Partey. So I feel like Arsenal's slow down in form has coincided with him, who I would have said a few months ago was their most important player. He just didn't look at it tonight to me.
Yeah, and I think that's been true the last 3 or 4 weeks. I guess form has dipped, which happens in the course of a season. I wonder as well tonight. I mean, for instance, the first goal, he shouldn't be letting De Bruyne run off him like that. He must know that's a risk when there's a high ball play towards Haaland. That it's going to be it's going to be helped on to a runner, and his job is to track that runner. So I think that's evidence of a physical decline or a mental decline. I don't know, but he's not quite there. I do wonder though tonight whether part of his problem in dealing with De Bruyne's runs, with Haaland dropping deep, was that Xhaka wasn't quite on it tonight either, which I think is understandable given the illness he's had. I think probably Xhaka wasn't anywhere near fully fit, and maybe had it not been City, had it not been a game that Arsenal had to win really to continue to have a chance of a title, he maybe wouldn't have started. So you're absolutely right about Partey. But I do wonder whether the Xhaka situation maybe didn't help him tonight.
I mean, I'm completely going to go against everything I've just said about the defence of Arsenal, but was there not a case for Jorginho playing in this game, Jonathan?
Well, ahead of Xhaka.
Well, ahead of either really, but probably not Partey, but because of Xhaka's illness, Jorginho's played in a lot of big games in the past. It just got that exudes a little bit of calm on the ball that didn't really feel like it was there for Arsenal. It's easy to say all these things with hindsight.
Yeah, I mean, there is a case for that. Yeah, I mean, I guess we've praised Arsenal signings generally this season. The player who hasn't really done what his price tag suggests he should have done is Fabio Vieira, who I thought was really poor against Southampton. I guess it was never going to be a night for him tonight anyway, but I think the start of the season, they'd have liked to think that was an option were Xhaka not fully fit, if he needed to be replaced. But Jorginho and Partey together at the back of midfield, in that respect, you'd say, that maybe would have been more sensible. Not just because positionally it would have given an extra blocker in there for De Bruyne's runs, but also, as you say, there's been a panickiness about Arsenal. Well, since the Liverpool fight back began, I think you've even seen Odegaard's passings gone awry. I thought there was a sort of 20 minutes, half an hour spell in the middle of a game against Southampton when he was really poor. So maybe Jorginho's calm just to sort of give him a chance to hold possession a bit more, not to be quite so flustered. But having said that, I think Arsenal did have more of the ball, didn't they? They did have.
At one stage, I was surprised when I saw the statistics.
It was early on. It was about 2/3. But I think even by the end, I think it was still slightly more than half. So, but I mean, I guess the second half was essentially it was a third goal that had gone in. The sort of 25 minutes when nothing happened, where both teams seemed quite happy to just sort of let the clock run down. But I think with hindsight, maybe that would have been a good idea.
Yeah, kind of a role reversal for Haaland and De Bruyne tonight, Ben, in that Haaland was the one that making the goals for De Bruyne when it comes to these crucial times for Man City, when the running's there and you need to keep churning out results, season after season, De Bruyne just continues to deliver.
Yeah, and that's why many sort of suggest that he is the best to have graced the Premier League. It was, as I mentioned, City essentially played a 4-2-4 at times when they had the ball, and De Bruyne was making those runs beyond Haaland, and he was pushed so high up towards Haaland, he thought, like, they're going to get over in the midfield here, and they just find a way to bypass it. Haaland would knock it onto De Bruyne, he'd make those runs in beyond, and that's how the first goal came about, and they almost scored a second midway through the first half through that exact same approach. It was just another one of those instances where Guardiola's spotted a weakness in the squad. I mean, it caught Partey out numerous times. He didn't know whether to track Haaland dropping deeper or to sit with De Bruyne making those runs in beyond, which, it sort of stems back to what Jonathan mentioned about the physical or mental decline of Partey this season, whether it's kind of such a season that's taken a lot out of him physically and mentally. But, it's just this versatility that comes from playing under Pep Guardiola, and De Bruyne sort of epitomises that tactical flexibility that he affords the team in the final third.
Yeah, I was trawling social media when the first goal went in, Jonathan. There was a few people asking questions of Ramsdale. Do you think he should have done better with the first goal?
Possibly, but it happened very quickly. I think De Bruyne hit the shot probably slightly earlier than he was anticipating. It was very well placed. Was hit pretty crisply. Yeah, I mean, look, I think it never looks good when a keeper's beaten from outside the box by a shot that's not an absolute rocket, but I think it's just a very good finish. I think there was at least 2 or 3 players who you'd point the finger at on that goal before Ramsdale. I think to blame Ramsdale for that would be pretty harsh.
And in fairness, it wasn't as if in that first half in particular he wasn't making saves. He seemed to have that persistent battle with Haaland, especially for the first hour of the game, and it was unusual for Haaland. His finishing wasn't as laser-like as it has been all the way throughout the season. And in the end, it turned out that all he had to do was take his headband off or whatever it was to score his goal. But Ramsdale, he was too busy for a game of that magnitude, wasn't he? And again, I think this just shows the drop-off in Arsenal in recent weeks.
I mean, it could easily have been 4-0 by half-time. And had it been 4-0 at half-time, we wouldn't have been saying, every shot City hit flew in. You'd have been thinking that's actually a pretty fair reflection of the game. I don't think Arsenal. I mean, you may have the actual stats for this, Ben, but the only sort of shot I remember Arsenal having in that first half was that Partey chance. I don't know, 41, 42 minutes, something like that, when the ball was sort of rolled to him just outside the box, and he tried to just sort of bend it in. As he was it against Tottenham, he scored that goal earlier in the season. He just didn't quite get enough whip on it, and it went wide. But 40 minutes without having a shot while your keepers made 3 or 4 really good saves. That shows how under the cosh they were. Yeah,
I mean, kind of the 2 worst things you can do really in football, Ben. You concede an early goal, which probably throws out the plan that you've had all week, and then right on half time in stoppage time, you concede off a set piece. So from Arsenal's point of view, although City were by far the most dominant team, the timing of the 2 goals will be a frustration to Arteta, and the fact that the second was a set piece.
Yeah, especially as Arsenal, despite going behind so early on, did show sort of glimpses that they were coming back into the game. As Jonathan mentioned, the Partey effort that was, it did go wide, but it showed that they could create those chances. Obviously, Arsenal will just start his VAR for that. Initially, it looks like
he's onside at the end of the day.
He is, but initially you think he's so far offside, you can tell, and then they draw the lines. You think, well, how? Like, I didn't understand how. There's just technology, and that's why it's there to make these big calls. It completely changes the dynamic of Arteta's halftime team talk. You think, well, we are behind, we are still in it though because of our goalkeeper, which isn't great, but we're still in the game. And to then concede a second, as you said, on the stroke of half time, really throws a spanner in the works for what he's going to do at the break.
Yeah, and for those of you who regularly watch the Edge of the Box podcast, and welcome, by the way, to those that don't. Usually, obviously, this live's the first time we're doing this kind of thing. But Jonathan, a few good shouts on our podcast recently. For one of the first times ever, one of them has come from me. Since I singled out John Stones and been the best centre-back in Europe, turned into one of the best goal-scoring centre-backs in Europe. 2 goals now since I said that.
Yeah, I mean, if he's even a centre back, maybe he's a right back, maybe he's a centre
Centre back this
midfielder.
evening, wasn't he? Centre back.
Was a centre back this evening, but you're right, he has been excellent. But I mean, just on the set plays, mainly because I just don't want to talk about you being right. But
it doesn't happen often.
Arsenal hadn't conceded a goal from a cross set play this season until Tarkowski header for Everton, which I think was last weekend of January. Since when they conceded 4 more in the league. That I think actually it's probably the Brentford game, which was that the week before the Everton game, I think, when people suddenly realised actually Ramsdale's not that good on crosses. You put the ball on top of him, he's not great. And so, I mean, I know it wasn't an in-swinger tonight, but that has become a problem for Arsenal, is set plays. And I think it's something, conversely, that you wouldn't necessarily think of a Guardiola team being particularly good from set plays. This season, I think that was that the 5th goal from a cross set play tonight in the league? And you think Haaland's 5 goals against Leipzig, 4 of them stem from corners. So partly it is Haaland's obviously big, and that really helps them set plays. But I suspect they've actually worked on that as well. That they've realised that set plays are it's an easy way to get an advantage, and when things have gone wrong for City in the past, which has not been very often, the tendency has been for them just to miss chances, for them not to convert domination into goals. Well, if set plays are a threat for you, then obviously that enhances your potency, but also it makes opponents wary of conceding corners and free kicks, and then you get more chances of open play as well. So it seems to me this season that the City really have stepped up on set plays. They do look a lot more dangerous than they have in the past, and so it wasn't a surprise to me tonight that City scored from a free kick as it turned out, but from a corner or a cross free kick.
And I don't have the Arsenal player heights in front of me, but is this again a case of you've taken out Saliba? I imagine he's their tallest player, Saliba.
He's certainly their best head of the ball, isn't he?
So it's going to make them more vulnerable, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, absolutely. That's clearly part of it. But I mean, if you think of how Tony dominated Saliba in that Brentford game, it's not that it wasn't an issue when Saliba was there. It's just it's got worse when he's not there.
Yeah. So you get to half time, it's 2-0. And Ben, were you surprised Arsenal didn't make any changes at half time? Because again, it kind of just looked like he sent out the team to go again, but I didn't even feel like there was a subtle change to anything that Arsenal were doing. It was more like, hopefully we get the next goal. I'll send us out and try and do the same thing again that we did in the first half. But if it hasn't worked in the first half against the machine that is Man City, maybe they could have done with some changes.
Yeah, I think Arteta might have seen, again, as they sort of forge a couple of half chances, that if they keep at it, maybe one will fall their way. Again, that Stones goal on the stroke of half time probably swayed. I mean, it should have swayed Arteta's decision. That maybe a more experienced manager would have tinkered accordingly. But as you said, they went out in the same way in the second half, and I'm surprised he didn't make a halftime change. Perhaps bring Jorginho on to get some more control. I saw it mentioned on Twitter, maybe take off Holding for Jorginho, put Partey back to right back and Ben White centre back, just to have that additional control, that ball, that tempo setting midfielder in there alongside Xhaka and Ødegaard, just to help control things in the middle of the park. But in a game of this magnitude, to go out and essentially put in the same system and same setup, I mean, City must have been buzzing when there were no changes made at half time by Arsenal.
Because at the start of the game, I can't remember if they were 1-0 down at this point or not. Martinelli made a run right away across from the left-hand side and popped up in an area you wouldn't really expect him, kind of centrally, but more to the right of the pitch. So I thought, okay, maybe Arsenal do have a plan here, but I'm genuinely racking my brains. I know they scored. I don't remember Ederson making a save in that whole game. Is that right? I genuinely can't remember him making a save.
Yeah, I mean, certainly not a meaningful save. I think that was still at 0-0 when Martinelli made that run.
Yeah, do you remember the bit I'm talking about?
Yeah, because I remember thinking, is this just sort of the way it happens to have worked, or is this the plan? And I think it was just the way it happened to have sort of fallen. And to be honest, if it had been a plan, it would have been pretty strange, given that you'd have thought Arsenal's wide players running at their fullbacks was where they might have got joy. And the fact that they didn't get opportunities from wide areas, I'm not even sure necessarily that's because Martinelli and Saka played badly. They didn't get the ball. And that was the thing that was so impressive about City in the first half. It's not just how dangerous they looked when they got the ball. It was their press was so good. When there were long spells that first half where Arsenal just couldn't get the ball out of their half, which is probably why they had the possession stats were so much in Arsenal's favour. There was that moment, I don't know, probably 15, 20 minutes in, when Arsenal must have passed the ball, I don't know, a dozen or 15 times in their own half, always looking nervous, always going backwards. And in the end, Gabriel just slices it out for throw-in. And there was no space. There were no options there. And so they end up with Ramsdale having to take goal kicks long, but they weren't even winning those balls because you're hitting them up at Gabriel Jesus, who is not that type of forward. And so I think that's where Guardiola sides, when they're good, that's where they're really good. That's where they're different to other good teams, is their pressing when it's on song is so stifling. And then that obviously facilitates their own maintenance of possession.
Yeah, I mean, Saka and Martinelli were shut down so quickly by the fullbacks and the press that they converge on them so fast that even if they did pick up the ball, I mean, Arsenal felt quite turgid with the way they were building up anyway. It's very, very slow, but that probably does come down to the way Manchester City play.
And a lack of confidence caused by the last 3 games. I mean, it's the two things working together that City were able to exploit that lack of confidence. And I think that's one of the things that that we've sort of stopped talking about in managers. I think it was a thing that was talked about sort of 20, 25 years ago, of managers who sort of sensed the mood of a game and sensed when to step it up or sense when to break up the patterns. And I think as we've gone down the statistical route, we've sort of lost a bit of the psychology of a game. I think Guardiola would have seen that Arsenal are vulnerable. They've had 3 really bad games in a row where there's been periods in all those games where even their best players were struggling to complete simple passes. Put pressure on them because they're fragile, and they did, and Arsenal broke.
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting comments in the live chat. One that's just come in has come from Scared. I'm not sure I've said that right at all. Saying Trossard and Jorginho should have started for Jesus and Partey. We've already discussed the Jorginho piece, Jonathan. But on Trossard, things were going well when he was in the team. And I know Jesus has come back and scored a couple of goals, but arguably they've taken out one of their form players to accommodate Jesus back in the side, and things haven't gone great since that happened. Yeah,
no, I think that's a totally fair point. I can see you want to play Jesus at City. You sort of think, narrative demands that he will do something in that game. But on form, I agree with you. Trossard's playing better, and I think that the fact that he's been relegated to the bench is an oddity. That we talked about Arsenal's squad being too slim, and yet they've got this glut of forwards. They can't play them all. So whether this was the game to leave Jesus out, I don't know, because Jesus' pressing is so good. But I think certainly the way he's just sort of come back in and Jesus fits, he has to play. I think that isn't particularly fair on Trossard, and I don't think it's been particularly helpful for the team.
And David Stiles has said in the comments as well, many of the Arsenal players seem to lose their head during and after the game, but they looked beaten from the first minute tonight. And once that third goal goes in, Ben, it is game over if it wasn't already. Do you agree with that comment from David? It felt like to me that Arsenal were kind of trying to create a rivalry tonight with Man City. It was almost as if the Man City players just weren't having it and kind of saying we're a level above you. There's no rivalry here. We're going to win the league. We're going to win this game as well.
Yeah, and that's why City are the best in the league. They're not top, but 2 points off Arsenal, 2 games in hand, and the far superior goal difference that's increased by plus 6 tonight after City's easy win. That's why City are going to probably win the league, because they just have this knowledge and experience of grinding teams down. Not in terms of just chasing points, but psychologically too. Like Arsenal are going to have seen that they, threw away 2-goal lead at Liverpool, and then City go and win. They throw away a 2-goal lead against West Ham, and City won again. They throw 3-1 down at home against Saints. They came back to draw 3-3, but City didn't even need to play, and Arsenal are thinking, well, I've got this rampant City machine chasing me down, and they don't have that experience to get them over the line. I mean, Jesus and Zinchenko signed; they've got that whole knowledge of getting a team over the line when it matters most. But that's 2 players, a core squad of about 16, 18 players. City are just, when they're rampant and they want to catch you down, they will catch you.
Is that where you think Arsenal have fallen down, Jonathan? Because even Zinchenko and Jesus, yes, they've got the experience of being involved in those title races and getting over the line. They've probably not got the experience of being the main players at a team trying to do that. Do you think that's one of the reasons Arsenal have fell down in the end this season?
Possibly, but fundamentally the squad's not deep enough. It's not good enough. I mean, the lack of experience doesn't help, but they're probably 3 or 4 top class players short of being a side who could challenge regularly for the title. And so we knew all the way through the season, as soon as they got a couple of injuries, suspensions, that they were likely to dip away, because we'd seen that you could see the squad's not as deep as title winning squads need to be. So I think the experience of winning titles is I'm never 100% convinced that makes that much difference anyway. I think it's an easy thing to say in retrospect to explain what's happened, but in this case, I just don't think it's anywhere near as relevant as the players, and in fact, they just don't have enough good ones.
No, I mean, looking back to January, Jorginho and Trossard especially Trossard, you would say he's a good signing, because I think he scored important goals at various points in the season.
Well, and you'd certainly rather have him for Mudryk than Mudryk for 50 million quid less.
100%. So they did that well, but you're looking at, I'm going to completely get his name wrong here. The lad they signed at centre back, is it Kior? Is that how you say his name? I don't know how to say his name, because I've never seen him play. He's barely come on the pitch.
Kivior, the Polish.
That's it.
So he came in for Spezia, was it he was at?
Yeah, but they spent a fair amount of money on him. And when you're spending that amount of money on someone, was he the right type of centre back, for example, for them to be spending money on, when you look at what has ended up happening with Saliba? So in January, it's difficult to say whether they actually did what they needed to or not, because I think Trossard has been a success. Jorginho, I feel like he hasn't played that much. He obviously was involved in an important goal against Villa at Villa Park at the time. Did they do enough in January, considering the position they were in?
Well, I mean, what you would say about the Kivior signing is they identified a weakness in the squad. And the truth is, none of us have seen Kivior play enough to have any idea what's going on there. Whether
some of us can't even say his name.
I mean, I may be saying it wrongly. I don't know.
No, you're right. You're right.
But it may be that next season he looks an exceptional player, and you think that was very astute bit of business. But it looks odd in retrospect that they. I mean, he is a Poland international. He has played a dozen times for Poland, something like that. It's not that he's got 1 or 2 caps. He's got some, and he's young. But as I say, I've got no idea what sort of player he is, because we've never seen him. Yeah, I think the only time I've seen him play was when he came on late at Liverpool in the midst of that crisis, and when everyone was panicking, and he looked pretty panicky. But then so did everybody else. So I wouldn't necessarily judge him on that. But I guess if you're an Arsenal director, you've got to look longer term. So you've brought in Trossard, brought in Jorginho, who are very experienced players. Could you have found an experienced centre back for 15, 20, 25 million? Well, possibly. But at the same time, you can't just sort of spend 40, 50 million on players who you've probably only got 2 or 3 years left in them. Even if this is I don't want to say it's a one-off chance to win the title, but it's a better chance to win the title than I think they're going to have next season, or the season after that, or the season after that. So maybe they should have gambled on somebody who's a bit more of a known quantity. But until we see Kivior, until we know why he's not playing, is he another? Is he a Fabio Vieira, or is there something else going on? I don't know. And Fabio Vieira may come good. I don't know. I mean, he's also young, and I don't want to sort of again criticize a player I feel like I haven't really seen an enormous amount of to know what's going on.
I guess by and large, in the last few transfer windows, I think Edu and his transfer team they've got credit in the bank, really, haven't they? Because they have galvanised Arsenal, and Arsenal are a completely different beast to what they've been over the last few years. That you wouldn't have said in the last maybe 5-6 years Arsenal are heading in the right direction. I think now you would. And even the fact that they'll qualify for the Champions League this season, I think, is maybe a slight acceleration on where maybe people thought they were going to be. None of us put them in the top four at the start of the season when we were predicting what was going to happen. Nobody really said Arsenal we're going to get top four, and they're going to be in the Champions League next season, which will open up a new kind of market for bringing players in as well. And like I say, they've got credit in the bank from the last 2 transfer windows. It's just maybe they just needed that one more bit of experience. They kind of got a little bit of experience in attack, bought some experience in midfield as well in January. They didn't bring in the experience in the defence. And yeah, so if Saliba had stayed fit, things might have been different, but it just does feel like the drop-off from him to Holding has been huge. Ben, we've already mentioned Holding finished like De Bruyne to kind of make a consolation goal for Arsenal, sweeping that cross home from Trossard. Again, another assist for Trossard, but it hadn't really been Haaland's night, but it wouldn't be a Man City game without him scoring. As I say, he unleashed his hair, and then he unleashed an easy finish at the end of the game to get his customary goal.
Yeah, and I think he's one off getting he's got 49 competitive goals for City this season, which is a remarkable achievement. Even like for a striker of his caliber in a team of City's, with the support act behind him, it's an incredible feat by him. But as you say, it wouldn't feel like a routine home win without Haaland getting on the score sheet. But it just felt like roles reversed tonight, especially in the first beginning of especially in the first half when Haaland was the one-tone provider for De Bruyne. But, it got Arsenal all out of sync. It worked. City won 4-1 and Haaland got on the score sheet. So what's to complain about?
I mean, recent weeks, Jonathan, Haaland his goal output has obviously been ridiculous the entirety of the season. He's chipped in with a fair few assists, it feels like recently. He's almost showing a different kind of facet to his game now as the season comes to an end.
Yeah, I think Guardiola's been trying to get him to drop a bit deeper pretty much all season. I remember the Manchester derby. There was the game at Old Trafford when United won, and there was a moment in the second half of that game. I think when City was still 1-0 up, when there was a break for an injury, and Guardiola was on the pitch screaming at Haaland, and the gesture is he's sort of doing that as if to say drop off, go as a false nine. This is me trying to read it from behind from the press box.
Unreal body language and translation from you. Absolutely incredible. I don't know.
Thank you very much. So I remember sort of Haaland just sort of looking at him and said, "What are you talking about?" No, I'll just stay over here and score goals. Was again reading his body language without even any hand gestures, but reading his face. But he has definitely dropped deeper. The last sort of month or so, and I think that's been one of the real fascinations of this season, that the first half of it, certainly up to the World Cup, maybe even slightly beyond, I think there was a slight disconnect between the way Haaland wanted to play and the way that Guardiola wanted to play. That Guardiola's football's previously been all about control. It's been about getting as many midfielders there as possible, having your centre forward dropping back in the midfield, pass. But I think I'm right in saying that game at Old Trafford, I think the previous season, the City player with the fewest number of touches had 73 or 70 something, and Haaland in that game had 20 odd. And so even in that game, which was post World Cup, you sort of think, that these two things don't gel. But what we've seen over the last sort of 6 weeks, 2 months, is that that sort of friction has been creative, and they have found another way of playing. And the way they played against Bayern, the way they played tonight, they were quite happy to play without the ball, and they can hurt you by going direct, which has never been or very rarely been a trait of Guardiola teams before. They've always had to have 60-70% possession. They've always seemed to have to have, to be certain of winning a game, they would have to have 20-25 chances. They never have fewer chances than the opposition, and yet they often didn't win those games. Or more often than you might think wouldn't win those games. But now, they can create chances without the ball. They don't feel flustered when they don't have the ball. I think it was Bernardo Silva was talking about that last week, saying that we used to feel very anxious if we didn't control possession, but now it doesn't matter because we know we can go more direct. We know what we're doing with that, and I think that's Haaland clearly is the major part of that. But I think Grealish as well has really benefited from that, and that is then partly to do with Cancelo leaving. I think Grealish should look more convincing without the fullback coming inside him.
Yeah.
So going to that sort of, the sort of Tony Pulis, sorry, excuse me, the Tony Pulis style back four of 4 centre backs. It has added an element of Pulis. It has added that slightly more direct element. And so you then think, well, how do you play in City? You can't just sort of think, well, let them have sterile possession, because they can hurt you in other ways as well. So I think they should do the treble this season. I'd be surprised now if they didn't do the treble.
I mean, one of the last things I was expecting to hear tonight was Pep's tactics being compared to Pulis. That I wouldn't have bet on that happening to not bet what you said. It is kind of true. It's very different.
It is. It's very different. I mean, I'm clearly being slightly facetious saying that, but I think there's something really interesting has happened that for the last sort of 30 years, maybe even more than 30 years, the last 60 years, as soon as we got back fours, so back four becomes in the mainstream sort of 1958 World Cup. That's when it spreads from Brazil to Europe. It's become mainstream in England by sort of 62, 63-ish. So before Conte's Chelsea, the last team to win the league in England with a back three was Harry Catterick's Everton, which I'm going to say was 62-3. Is that right?
I don't know what you're asking.
It's around about that.
How old do you think I am?
12, 13? So back fours, full back side could push forward to create different angles of attack. That's one of the reasons why it's so successful. And from that moment, from the early 60s, you start to get increasingly attacking fullbacks. You get Giacinto Facchetti with Inter in Italy. You get Silvio Mussolini with Boca in Argentina. You get Nilton Santos with Brazil. And as each decade goes by, the fullback gets more and more attacking. And until we get the Liverpool of Alexander-Arnold and Robertson, where it was 25 assists between them the season that Liverpool won the league. And you sort of think, well, where do you go next? They can't become any more attacking. And Guardiola's totally flipped on his head. He goes, no, we'll just sit in 2 centre backs there, and one of them might drift in the midfield. But we don't need our fullbacks to overlap anymore. As it's almost like the fullbacks have gone all the way up to the end of the pitch, and they just sort of come around the other side again now. It's like going around the North Pole, and suddenly you're back where you started.
Lovely, great analogy, and great. I mean, you're taking full advantage of us being live tonight by knowing that you're 19.
It's not going to get cut out.
Isn't going to get cut. But yes, that's a lovely way to finish this live broadcast. And I guess the scary thing for the rest of the Premier League is that usually Man City signings get better in their second season. So Haaland playing that Ricardo Fuller role is going to get even better next season, isn't it? I think whilst our internet connections have remained stable, I think I'm going to call it quits tonight. Whilst we're ahead. So thanks to people that have joined us live, and thanks to those that will go on and watch the video as well. If you have enjoyed the podcast, the late night podcast, then please subscribe to the channel with your post notifications on. We'll be back with Edge of the Box next week. Thanks to Ben. Thanks to Jonathan as well. Night, stay safe.